Just be careful. If you put everything as required and your form is not easy to use, people might rely and go back to what they were doing before, which is sending you an email. Things to check before releasing an Asana form. I love Asana forms. They are amazing to get information from the outside of your team or outside of your company. But after spending a lot of time creating a form, there's a couple of mistakes that you might make that I don't want you to make because I've made them in the past. So we put together a list of things that you need to check when releasing a form. Let me go through the list and show you on the screen. First, just to get you back on the horse, you can get Asana forms within the customize menu of any project. You go into customize, you go into forms, and this is where you can create your form. I'm going to open this one, which is one we've been working on. That's a demo space. I'm going to use this as an example. The first thing you have to make sure you do not forget is to check the visibility. That's within the settings right here, within the form settings. When you finalize a form, make sure that you have the right access, the right visibility. Very often we created a form, send the link to the client just so that they can get back to us and say, we don't have access, it doesn't work, because we were using the organization only setting instead of using the anyone can access. This is a very important one. Make sure that you do this properly. The second thing you can do is to make sure that you customize the name of the tasks. As you might know, when a form is submitted, it creates a task in the Asana project. That task by default will be named after the form itself, but very often you want the task to be named something else. You want the task to actually be named after the answers given in the form. To do that, you can go here and you can click on the drop down and you can select the different questions that are part of the form. Also, the order is important. If you want email, then name, or if you want name, then email, make sure to click in the right order and you're going to see that the content here changes to really show you what the tasks are going to be named after. The third tip is to customize the confirmation message. We haven't done it here, but you should really thank people for submitting, explain to them what are the next steps. Are you going to get back to them? Are you going to add them on the Asana task? Are you going to email them within 48 hours? Make sure to customize. And no, there's no way to have a fancy confirmation message with an image. That's really like flat, simple text for now. Maybe that's going to get better down the road. Also, make sure to map important questions to Asana custom fields. When a form is submitted, it creates a task. All the answers go into the task description. That makes it really hard to triage, to filter, to sort, to search, to do dashboards. It just doesn't work because all the data is within the task description. If you map the questions to actual custom fields, then the answers will go directly into custom fields, into columns in the list view, and that will allow you to have all the filtering and sorting and dashboards as well as all the rules. The thing is, if you don't think about this right away, and if you do this down the road, it's going to be too late. You're going to have to manually go back and update the data. So make sure to do that first before releasing the form. Even go a bit too far by mapping too many questions. It's easier to go back instead of doing this later down the road. To do this, you can click on a question and there you can connect to an actual field and you can select a field that you already have in the project, or you can go through here to add a new field. Very important. So you can map the text question to text fields. You can map the drop down to drop downs. So really try to map as many things as possible, if it makes sense, obviously, but sometimes you're not very sure if you're going to need that data to be consolidated. So if you're not sure, then you should definitely map the question to an actual custom field. Also, make sure to use the required toggle. If you want something to be answered, just toggle that thing to make sure that people answer the form. Just be careful. If you put everything as required and your form is not easy to use, people might rely and go back to what they were doing before, which is sending you an email. So you have to make sure to create a nice experience for everyone and just use the required field when it is actually required. Do not use this for every single question. Make sure to also use branches. For example, if you ask a question like priority, let's say this, what's the priority of the request? You can have something that say high, regular, or low. Right there on the right, there's a button that says add a branch. If I click here, you can add a new branch, and then you can ask questions that only people who said hi will see. In that case, that could be something like, that's a way to have a very clean form that doesn't show everything, but only shows the questions you have to answer. That's a very nice, very neat way of doing this. So make sure to use the branches if your plan allows branches to be used. Make sure to use emojis at the beginning of questions. For example, priority could be this one, email could be this one. I think emojis make things a bit more fun and easier to read and go through the list pretty quickly. I really love emojis, and if you decided on emojis in the company, like official emojis, make sure to use them in the forms as well. Make sure to have a banner at the top as well, like a nice banner that shows your company logo, shows your department name, whatever you want. You want to make the form easy to use. You don't want people to go back and use email like they were using email before. You can decide in the settings to assign each submission to someone specifically. You can literally pick someone from the list right here. You can do this, or you can also decide to notify people because they are project members. If I go back into here, there we have the project members. I can add Larry, for example, here. If I go into manage notifications, I can decide who gets notified about new submission, and I can use an assignee as well as notify people. I can assign to the team lead, but notify the rest of the team, for example. That's a choice you have to make. Make sure to not do both, otherwise people will get notified twice, but this is really something you have to make sure. You want at least one person to see notifications coming in. And too often I made the mistake of not notifying anyone, and after a couple of weeks I was like, nobody used my form, that's weird. And I had dozens of answers already that nobody was notified about. Make sure as well to customize the form name as well as the description. By default, the form will be named after the project, and sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense. So make sure to change the name right here and to use the description to explain what the form is for and how to use the form and when and in which situation you want the form to be used. Actually, I have two other tips for you. Before last one is, if you keep a list of the forms you have somewhere, make sure to add that new form into the list. In our case, we have what we call a form index, a form directory, where we list all the forms. So make sure to have a checklist that includes adding the new form into that list. Finally, the last one is make sure to set up the right rules. If you go into rules and you create a new rule like this, the trigger will be task added to the project through a form submission, and you can combine this with other triggers. For example, you could say new form submission and priority is high, then assign to someone specifically, or post a message in the comments specifically. So make sure to create the right rules to either route the submission to the right department or assign to the right people based on what the answers were. That's it for the tips. Again, the most important one is the visibility. I think everything else can be fixed later down the road, but this one is very important. If you don't want to look dumb when you send a link that doesn't work, make sure you have the right setting in the visibility. See you around.